The soft rustle of leaves whispered in the gentle breeze as Elijah Carter sat on an old wooden bench in Cedar Grove Park. The sun bathed the park in a warm golden hue, casting long shadows of towering oak trees that stood like silent guardians. Elijah's favorite spot overlooked a small pond, its surface shimmering like glass. Ducks paddled lazily, and the occasional ripple broke the tranquil reflection of the cloud-dappled sky. Elijah leaned back, letting out a deep sigh of relief. This moment felt like a small victory. After weeks of juggling exams, late-night study sessions, and basketball practice, he finally had a chance to breathe. He clutched a paperback novel, a gift from his dad, and ran his fingers over the worn edges of the cover. It was one of those rare afternoons where time seemed to stand still, and the world felt at peace. As he gazed at the scenery, Elijah's thoughts drifted. At 16, he carried the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to navigate life's challenges with resilience. Growing up as the son of Chief William Carter, the city's first black police chief, meant Elijah often faced heightened scrutiny. People either expected him to be perfect or assumed he would fail. But Elijah had always walked his own path, balancing his father's high expectations with his dreams of becoming an architect someday. Elijah's peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel path. He glanced up to see a tall, broad-shouldered white man in a police uniform approaching. The man's face was stern, his ice-blue eyes scanning the park with a look of thinly veiled disdain. "Hey, kid," the officer called out, his voice gruff. "What are you doing here?" Elijah furrowed his brows. "Just reading," he replied, holding up his book. The man's badge glinted in the sunlight. Officer Grant Wilkes, it read. Elijah had heard whispers about him, a man known for his harsh demeanor and frequent complaints about changes ruining the city. Elijah felt a chill creep up his spine as Wilkes stepped closer. "You look suspicious sitting here alone," Wilkes said, folding his arms. "What's in your pockets?" Elijah blinked, confused. "Just my phone and some change." "Empty them, now." Elijah hesitated but complied, pulling out his phone and a few coins. Wilkes snatched them, inspecting them as though expecting to find stolen goods. "I've had reports of theft around here," Wilkes said, his voice laced with accusation. "You fit the description." Elijah's heart pounded. "I haven't stolen anything," he said calmly. "I'm just here to relax." Wilkes sneered. "Yeah? What's your name?" "Elijah Carter." Wilkes froze for a moment, his expression shifting before he covered it with a smirk. "Carter, huh? Like the police chief? Nice try. Kid, you think I'm going to fall for that?" "It's true," Elijah insisted, his voice steady but firm. "My dad is Chief William Carter." Wilkes's face darkened. "Listen, boy," he said, leaning in close. "You people don't get to waltz in here and do whatever you want. Not in my park." Elijah felt his chest tighten as Wilkes's words sank in. He knew this wasn't about a theft. It was about something deeper. Something uglier. "Officer," Elijah began carefully, "I'm not trying to cause trouble. If there's been a misunderstanding, I'm happy to." "Shut it," Wilkes snapped, cutting him off. His voice rose, drawing the attention of a few park goers. "You're coming with me." Elijah stood his ground. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's hand shot out, grabbing Elijah's arm. The grip was tight, painful. "I said, you're coming with me." Around them, murmurs began to ripple through the small crowd that had gathered. People whispered, some pulling out their phones to record. But no one stepped forward. "Stop," Elijah said, wincing. "You're hurting me." Wilkes's eyes burned with fury. "You think you're special because of who your daddy is? Let me show you how things really work." The next moments felt surreal. Wilkes dragged Elijah toward a patch of grass where a dog had left its waste. "Kneel," Wilkes barked, his voice dripping with contempt. Elijah froze. "What? You heard me. Kneel and eat it," Wilkes growled. "Unless you want me to break your arm." Elijah's heart raced. The humiliation, the sheer cruelty of it, was overwhelming. He looked at the crowd, hoping someone would intervene, but the bystanders looked away, their faces a mix of fear and pity. Tears welled up in Elijah's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. "No," he said quietly. Wilkes struck him across the face, sending him to the ground. "You think you have a choice?" When Elijah refused again, Wilkes yanked him to his feet and handcuffed him. Resisting arrest, Wilkes muttered, loud enough for the crowd to hear, "I'm taking you in," as Wilkes led him away. Elijah caught sight of a young woman in the crowd. Her phone aimed directly at them. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she nodded subtly. Elijah felt a flicker of hope, a silent promise that someone, at least, was on his side. In the back of the police cruiser, Elijah's mind raced. He wasn't sure how, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't let Wilkes get away with this. The ride to the station felt like an eternity. Elijah sat in silence, his wrists raw from the tight cuffs. He glanced out the window, his reflection blending with the cityscape, a distorted version of himself. Wilkes drove with a smug grin, his knuckles tight on the wheel, as if savoring his display of power. When they arrived at the precinct, Wilkes dragged Elijah through the front doors, his grip unrelenting. A few officers glanced up from their desks, their expressions a mix of indifference and mild curiosity. "This one's a thief," Wilkes announced loudly, shoving Elijah toward the holding area. "I'm not a thief," Elijah said, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "I didn't do anything." Wilkes chuckled darkly. "You've got a smart mouth. Kid, let's see how long that lasts." As Elijah sat on the cold bench in the holding cell, his mind raced. The smell of sweat and disinfectant filled the air, and the faint buzz of a flickering fluorescent light above him grated on his nerves. He knew he had to act quickly. "You get one call," the desk officer said, sliding a phone into the cell. Elijah took a deep breath and dialed the one number he knew by heart. It rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. "Carter here, Dad." Elijah's voice cracked. He hadn't meant for it to, but the weight of the day overwhelmed him. "It's me." There was a pause on the other end. Then, Chief William Carter's voice became sharp, laced with urgency. "Elijah? Where are you? What's wrong?" "I'm at the station," Elijah said quietly. "They're saying I stole something." "I didn't, Dad, I swear." Chief Carter's silence was brief but telling. "Stay calm. I'm coming." Within 20 minutes, the sound of purposeful footsteps echoed through the station. Chief Carter entered, his imposing presence commanding immediate attention. His dark suit and polished badge were a stark contrast to the casual chaos of the precinct. "Where's my son?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Wilkes emerged from the back, his face twisted into a smirk. "Chief Carter, didn't expect to see you here. Your boy's been causing some trouble." Chief Carter's jaw tightened. "Release him, now." Wilkes shrugged nonchalantly. "Sorry, Chief, he's under arrest. Theft, resisting arrest, and..." "Enough," Carter interrupted, his voice rising. "I know my son. He's not a thief. And I know you, Wilkes." The tension in the room was palpable. Other officers exchanged uneasy glances. Sensing the brewing storm, Wilkes stepped closer, his posture defiant. "With all due respect, Chief, your son isn't above the law." Chief Carter didn't blink. "And neither are you. Whatever this is, it ends now. You think you can intimidate me?" Wilkes sneered. "You might run this department, but I know how things really work. People like you don't belong here." The room fell silent. Wilkes's words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, their meaning unmistakable. Chief Carter took a step forward, his voice steady but cold. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." Once released, Elijah recounted the events at the park in vivid detail. His voice was measured, but his hands trembled as he described the humiliation, the threats, and the physical assault. Chief Carter listened intently, his expression darkening with every word. "You did the right thing by staying calm," Carter said, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "But this isn't over. Wilkes won't get away with this." Elijah nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I want to fight this, Dad, not just for me, for everyone he's done this to, back at home." Chief Carter began his investigation. Files on Wilkes revealed a troubling pattern: excessive force complaints, racial profiling incidents, and a disturbing lack of accountability. Each document painted a clearer picture of a man who had abused his position for years. Meanwhile, Elijah reached out to friends and community members. Through social media, the story spread quickly. Videos from bystanders at the park surfaced, showing Wilkes's aggressive behavior and Elijah's calm demeanor. The footage sparked outrage, with hashtags like #Justice for Elijah trending within hours as the story gained traction. The city found itself at a crossroads. Protests erupted, some calling for justice for Elijah, while others rallied behind Wilkes, claiming he was just doing his job. The media descended on the small city, amplifying the divide. At school, Elijah faced mixed reactions. While many of his peers supported him, a vocal minority whispered behind his back, spreading rumors and casting doubt on his story. Elijah felt the weight of the scrutiny but refused to let it break him. "I'm not backing down," he told his best friend, Marcus, during lunch. "This is bigger than me." Among the chaos, allies began to step forward. Maya Bennett, a passionate civil rights attorney, reached out to the Carters, offering her services pro bono. "I've been waiting for a case like this," she told Chief Carter during their first meeting. "It's time to set a precedent." Maya's confidence and expertise brought a sense of hope. She and Chief Carter worked tirelessly to build a case, gathering witnesses, evidence, and testimonies that would expose Wilkes's corruption. Wilkes, meanwhile, faced mounting pressure. The viral videos and growing protests painted him as a villain. But he remained unrepentant. "They're trying to ruin my career," he complained to his lawyer. "All because I did my job." But cracks began to form in his facade. Fellow officers started distancing themselves, reluctant to be associated with his actions. The once untouchable Wilkes found himself increasingly isolated late that night. Chief William Carter sat in his study, surrounded by case files and newspaper clippings. The weight of the day bore down on him, but his resolve remained unshaken. Every document he uncovered about Wilkes painted a chilling picture of systemic failure, ignored complaints, falsified reports, and a disturbing pattern of targeting minorities. He stared at a framed photo of Elijah on his desk, a younger version of his son holding a basketball. His face lit with hope. "This isn't just about you anymore," Carter murmured. "This is about everyone who's been hurt." The phone buzzed on his desk. It was Maya Bennett, the lawyer who had offered her help earlier. "I've been reviewing the footage and witness statements," she said. "We have a strong case. But we'll need more. Wilkes has a lot of connections. He won't go down without a fight." "I'm not afraid of a fight," Carter replied firmly the next day. Elijah received a direct message on his social media. It was from Sarah Ruiz, the young woman who had been in the park and recorded the encounter. "I want to help." Her message read, "I saw everything. I have more videos. But I'm scared of what might happen if I come forward." Elijah showed the message to his father and Maya. "She's a key witness," Maya said. "If she's willing to testify, it could change everything." Elijah decided to respond himself. "I understand why you're scared," he typed, "but what happened to me has probably happened to others. If we don't stand up, it'll keep happening." Sarah agreed to meet them in person. At the meeting, she handed over additional videos showing Wilkes manhandling Elijah and shouting threats. "I couldn't just stand there," she said tearfully. "But I didn't know what to do," armed with new evidence. Maya and Chief Carter filed an official complaint against Wilkes. They demanded an internal investigation and initiated a civil lawsuit for abuse of power and racial profiling. The announcement sent shockwaves through the community. At a press conference, Maya addressed the media. "This isn't just about Elijah," she said passionately. "This is about holding those in power accountable. No one is above the law." Wilkes's lawyer fired back, claiming the accusations were baseless and politically motivated. "Officer Wilkes has served this community for years," he said. "He's being targeted unfairly." The stage was set for a legal and public battle, with both sides digging in their heels as the case unfolded. The city became a pressure cooker of tension. Protests filled the streets, with signs demanding justice for Elijah and chants of no justice, no peace. Across town, counter-protests emerged, supporting Wilkes and denouncing the lawsuit as an attack on law enforcement. Elijah attended one of the peaceful marches, standing alongside friends, neighbors, and strangers who believed in his cause. Holding a megaphone, he addressed the crowd. "This isn't just about me," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did. We're not fighting against the police, we're fighting against injustice." His words were met with applause and chants of support. But he knew the fight was far from over. Meanwhile, Chief Carter uncovered a damning piece of evidence, a hidden report detailing Wilkes's past misconduct. The report, buried by his superiors, outlined multiple instances of racial discrimination and excessive force, all dismissed without consequence. "This is it," Carter said, handing the report to Maya. "This proves he's been protected by the system." But there was a catch. The report implicated other high-ranking officers. some of whom were close allies of Carter. Releasing it would mean risking his career and the fragile trust he had built within the department. "You have to do it," Elijah said when his father shared the dilemma. "If you don't, he'll keep getting away with it." Carter nodded, knowing his son was right. As the case gained traction, social media played a crucial role in shaping public opinion. Elijah's story spread like wildfire, with hashtags and viral videos sparking national attention. Celebrities and activists voiced their support, turning the small-town case into a nationwide movement. But with the support came backlash. Elijah received hateful messages and threats online, and some accused him of fabricating the story for attention. The pressure weighed heavily on him, but he leaned on his friends and family for strength. "You're stronger than they know," Marcus told him one evening. "They're just scared because they know you're right." Wilkes, meanwhile, was rallying his own support. He met with a group of officers who shared his views, hoping to discredit Elijah and Chief Carter. "This isn't just about me," Wilkes said during one meeting. "They're trying to take down everything we stand for." He began spreading rumors about Elijah, planting doubts in the media. Stories of his supposed troubled past and connections to gangs began to surface. All baseless but damaging. Maya anticipated this move and preemptively released character references from Elijah's teachers, coaches, and community leaders. "We're not letting them control the narrative," she said firmly. The turning point came when a fellow officer, Detective Alan Brooks, approached Chief Carter. Brooks had worked alongside Wilkes for years and had grown disillusioned with his behavior. "I can't stay silent anymore," Brooks said. "I've seen what he's done, planting evidence, falsifying reports. It's wrong." Brooks's testimony was a game-changer. As a respected officer, his words carried weight and added credibility to Elijah's claims. But his decision to come forward came at a cost. Brooks faced ostracism from his colleagues and threats to his career. "I'm doing this because it's the right thing," he told Elijah, "not because it's easy." With the evidence piling up, public support for Elijah grew stronger. A coalition of civil rights organizations joined the fight, providing resources and amplifying the story. The city council held an emergency meeting to address the rising tension, with activists demanding reforms in policing and accountability for officers like Wilkes. Despite the progress, Elijah remained cautious. "We've come so far," he told his father one night. "But what if it's not enough?" "It will be," Carter replied, "because we're not stopping until it is." The law offices of Maya Bennett and Associates were a hive of activity. Boxes of documents, stacks of witness statements, and a whiteboard filled with timelines covered the conference room. Maya stood at the center, addressing her team as Chief Carter and Elijah looked on. "This is not just a trial," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "This is a chance to expose systemic abuse. Wilkes isn't just one bad officer, he's a symptom of a broken system. But we need airtight evidence to prove it." Maya turned to Elijah. "You'll need to testify. Your words will be powerful, but the defense will try to tear you down. Are you ready for that?" Elijah nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. "I'm ready, whatever it takes." Wilkes's defense team wasted no time going on the offensive. In a televised press conference, they painted Elijah as an unruly teenager with a chip on his shoulder. They referenced his social media posts, innocent comments about frustration with school or basketball, and twisted them into claims of anger issues. "He's just another troublemaker trying to play the victim," Wilkes's lawyer declared. Elijah felt the sting of the accusations but remained steadfast. Maya countered with a press statement, showcasing Elijah's achievements, his honor roll certificates, basketball trophies, and glowing testimonials from teachers. "Nice try," she muttered as the team returned to their preparation. The first day of the trial was electric. Cameras flashed as Elijah, his father, and Maya walked into the courthouse. Flanked by supporters, protesters on both sides gathered outside, their chants echoing through the halls. Inside, the tension was palpable. Judge Eleanor Graves, a no-nonsense woman with years of experience, presided over the case. "This court will remain impartial," she announced, her steely gaze silencing the murmurs in the gallery. The opening arguments set the stage. Maya outlined a narrative of abuse of power, racial prejudice, and systemic failure. The defense countered with claims of Wilkes's exemplary service record and his reasonable suspicion of Elijah when Elijah took the stand. The courtroom was silent. Maya guided him through his testimony. Starting with the events of that day. I was just sitting on the bench, reading a book, Elijah said, his voice steady despite the weight of the room. I wasn't bothering anyone. Then Officer Wilkes came over and accused me of stealing. I told him I didn't do anything. But he wouldn't listen. When he described the humiliation of being forced to kneel by the dog waste. Gasps rippled through the audience. Maya placed a comforting hand on his shoulder as he continued. What kept you calm in that moment? Maya asked. Elijah hesitated. I thought about my dad. He said quietly. About how he always told me to stay strong and never let hate win. The defense's cross-examination was brutal. They implied Elijah had been disrespectful, provoking Wilkes. But Elijah held his ground. I didn't provoke him, he said firmly. He hated me because of who I am. That's the truth. Maya called a series of witnesses to the stand. Starting with Sarah Ruiz. Her videos provided a clear view of Wilkes's aggression, and her tearful testimony reinforced Elijah's account. I was scared, Sarah admitted, but I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Next came Detective Alan Brooks, the officer who had worked alongside Wilkes. His testimony was a bombshell. I saw Wilkes target minorities repeatedly. Brooks said, he planted evidence more than once. I didn't speak up before. And I regret that, but I won't stay silent any longer. Brooks's words caused a stir. With reporters scrambling to jot down every detail, the defense attempted to discredit the witnesses. They questioned Sarah's motives, insinuating she sought attention, and painted Brooks as a disgruntled officer with a vendetta against Wilkes. But Maya anticipated their moves. In her cross-examination of Wilkes, she presented the hidden report Chief Carter had uncovered. Officer Wilkes, can you explain why multiple complaints of misconduct against you were dismissed without investigation? Maya asked, her tone razor sharp. Wilkes shifted uncomfortably. Those complaints were baseless. Maya's smile was cold. So, every person who filed them was lying. Wilkes's silence spoke volumes outside the courtroom. The case continued to dominate the media. Opinion pieces flooded in, some championing Elijah as a hero, others framing Wilkes as a victim of cancel culture. Elijah tried to block out the noise, focusing on the support he received from friends and family. His best friend, Marcus, stayed by his side, reminding him of the bigger picture. They're scared of what this means, Marcus said. That's why they're fighting so hard. But they can't stop the truth, in a dramatic twist. Maya uncovered an additional piece of evidence, body camera footage from another officer at the park that day. The footage, previously thought to be missing, was recovered through a whistleblower within the department. The video showed Wilkes berating Elijah, his words dripping with prejudice. You people think you can get away with anything, he said, his tone venomous. When the footage was played in court, the reaction was explosive. The defense scrambled to explain it. But the damage was done. The trial's final day was charged with emotion. Maya delivered a powerful closing argument, her voice unwavering. This case is about more than one boy's ordeal, she said. It's about the abuse of power. It's about a system that protects people like Officer Wilkes at the expense of the truth. Elijah Carter is not just a victim, he is a survivor. And today, we have the chance to stand with him and say enough is enough. The defense's argument relied on technicalities, attempting to cast doubt on the witnesses and evidence. But their words lacked the conviction that Maya's carried as the jury deliberated. Tension hung heavy in the air. Elijah and his family waited in a small room, the weight of the trial pressing down on them. I'm proud of you, Chief Carter said, pulling his son into a hug. No matter what happens, you've already won. Elijah nodded, but his stomach churned. He had fought so hard, but would it be enough? The jury filed back into the courtroom after 2 days of deliberation. The gallery was packed with supporters and detractors, the air thick with anticipation. Elijah sat between his father and Maya, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Judge Graves addressed the jury. Have you reached a verdict? The foreperson stood, her face unreadable. We have, Your Honor. Elijah held his breath as the foreperson read the verdict. On the charge of excessive use of force, we find the defendant, Officer Grant Wilkes, guilty. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by a wave of murmurs. The foreperson continued, listing the charges: racial profiling, misconduct, and false arrest. All met with a guilty verdict. Elijah exhaled, tears streaming down his face. Maya placed a hand on his shoulder. A small but triumphant smile on her lips outside the courthouse. Emotions ran high. Supporters of Elijah cheered, chanting, "Justice for Elijah." Protesters on Wilkes's side shouted angrily, claiming the verdict was unfair. The media swarmed both sides, capturing the polarized reactions. Elijah and his family stood on the courthouse steps. Maya addressed the crowd. "This verdict is not just a victory for Elijah but a step forward for everyone who has ever been silenced or oppressed. Today, we've shown that truth and justice can prevail." Elijah's father spoke next, his voice filled with emotion. "I want to thank everyone who stood by my son. This fight is far from over. We have a long way to go to ensure justice is the standard, not the exception." Wilkes's sentencing hearing followed soon after. The judge, citing his abuse of power and the trust placed in him as a law enforcement officer, sentenced him to 10 years in prison. "This court cannot overlook the harm your actions have caused," Judge Graves said sternly. "Your conduct was a betrayal of your badge and the community you swore to protect." Wilkes sat in stunned silence, his arrogance replaced by fear. As he was escorted out in handcuffs, the gallery erupted in applause. For many, it was the justice they had long awaited. The weeks following the trial were a whirlwind. Elijah found himself thrust into the spotlight, his story resonating with people across the country. He was invited to speak at events, share his experience, and advocate for police reform. Despite the support, the journey wasn't without challenges. The trauma of the incident lingered, and Elijah sought therapy to process the emotional scars. "It's okay to feel what you're feeling," his therapist told him during one session. "You went through something terrible, but you're turning that pain into something powerful." Elijah's case inspired a grassroots movement for justice. Community members organized rallies, demanding accountability and transparency in law enforcement. Maya and Chief Carter collaborated with civil rights groups to propose new legislation, including mandatory body cameras, independent investigations of misconduct, and stricter consequences for racial profiling. Elijah addressed a crowd at one of the rallies. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did. Change starts with us, and it starts now." The crowd roared in agreement, their unity a testament to the growing power of the movement in prison. Wilkes struggled to adapt, stripped of his badge and power. He was no longer untouchable. Fellow inmates, many of whom had been victims of police brutality, made their disdain for him clear. The isolation forced Wilkes to confront his actions. He wrote letters to his family, expressing regret, but they remained unanswered. One day, he received a letter. It was from Sarah Ruiz, the witness who had testified against him. "I don't expect you to change," the letter read, "but I hope you understand the pain you've caused and use this time to reflect. We're all human, even the people you tried to destroy." The words stayed with him, haunting him more than any punishment. Back at home, the Carter family began to heal. Chief Carter, though proud of the outcome, continued to grapple with the weight of the case. "I became a cop to protect people," he told Elijah one evening. "But seeing how broken the system is, it's hard to reconcile." "You're changing it, Dad," Elijah said, "one step at a time." Their bond grew stronger through the ordeal, a testament to their resilience and shared commitment to justice. Cedar Grove Park, once a symbol of division, became a gathering place for unity. Community members worked together to transform it into a space for healing and dialogue. A new plaque was unveiled at the park's entrance, in honor of courage and change, Elijah Carter. The dedication ceremony brought people from all walks of life together. Elijah stood beside the plaque, his heart swelling with pride. "This isn't just my story," he said during his speech. "It's ours. Together, we're creating something better." Elijah returned to school with a renewed sense of purpose. Though some classmates still whispered behind his back, most treated him with newfound respect. He focused on his studies and dreams of becoming an architect, knowing his future was bright despite the darkness he had endured. One afternoon, he received a letter from Maya. Inside was a handwritten note: "Keep fighting. The world needs more people like you." Years later, Elijah looked back on the events that had changed his life. The reforms inspired by his case had made tangible improvements in law enforcement practices. The community was far from perfect, but it was better. Elijah, now an architect, designed a memorial for victims of injustice. ensuring their stories would never be forgotten. Standing before the completed structure, he placed a hand on the cold marble. "We did it," he whispered. "For all of us." The days following the trial turned Elijah's life into a media circus. While national outlets praised the verdict as a victory for justice, certain networks framed it as a dangerous precedent that undermined law enforcement. Elijah Carter is being celebrated for disrespecting the badge. One commentator argued during a televised debate, "What does this say about the values we're teaching our kids?" Elijah turned off the TV in frustration. "Why do they keep twisting the truth?" he asked his father. Chief Carter, sitting nearby with a cup of coffee, sighed, "Because change scares people. They'll say anything to protect the status quo. You just have to focus on the truth." Despite the criticism, Elijah continued to receive overwhelming support from his community. Letters and messages poured in, many from people sharing their own experiences with injustice. One letter stood out. It was from a woman named Clara Johnson, who recounted how her teenage son had been falsely accused of theft and brutalized by officers in another city. "Your courage gives me hope that things can change," Clara wrote. "Thank you for speaking up when so many of us couldn't." Elijah read the letter aloud to his family, his voice breaking. "This is why we did it," he said, "for people like her." While Elijah became a symbol of resilience, he faced personal challenges that were harder to navigate. Friends he once trusted distanced themselves, uneasy with the attention his case had brought. One afternoon, he overheard two classmates whispering in the hallway. "Do you think he made it up?" one asked. "I mean, all this attention." Elijah confronted them. "You think I went through all that for attention? You think I wanted to be humiliated?" The classmates looked away, mumbling weak apologies, but the moment stayed with him. Even in victory, doubt lingered in some corners. Chief Carter wasn't immune to the fallout. While many officers respected him, others resented his role in exposing Wilkes. A few even whispered about filing grievances against him, claiming he had acted unethically during the investigation. During a tense meeting at the precinct, one officer, Sergeant Malloy, openly challenged him. "You threw one of your own under the bus. How are we supposed to trust you now?" Carter's response was calm but firm. "I didn't throw anyone under the bus. I held someone accountable for abusing their power. That's what this badge is supposed to stand for." The room fell silent, but the hostility was clear as invitations to speak at events grew. Elijah wrestled with whether to accept them. He wasn't sure if he was ready to be a public figure, but he couldn't ignore the opportunity to make a difference. At his first major speaking event, a youth conference on social justice, Elijah stood nervously behind the podium. Hundreds of young faces looked up at him, waiting. He took a deep breath. "I didn't ask for this fight," he began, "but when it came, I couldn't back down. What happened to me is happening to others every day. And we can't stay silent anymore." The room erupted into applause, and Elijah realized the power of his voice. With his rising profile came increased scrutiny. Trolls flooded his social media accounts with hateful comments, accusing him of lying or exaggerating his story. One particularly vile message read, "You're just a punk who wanted to ruin a good cop's life." Elijah's initial reaction was anger, but Marcus reminded him to stay focused. "They want you to react," Marcus said. "Don't give them the satisfaction." Instead, Elijah began sharing positive messages from supporters, shifting the narrative. "Hate won't silence me," he wrote in one post. "Truth will always win." Despite the negativity, Elijah's story sparked real change. Schools and community centers began hosting forums on racial profiling and policing. Local politicians proposed new measures to increase police accountability. Inspired by Elijah's courage, during one such forum, Elijah met Senator Evelyn Monroe, a passionate advocate for criminal justice reform. She invited him to speak at the state capitol, where legislation inspired by his case was being debated. This bill could save lives, she told him. Your voice can make a difference. Elijah's trip to the state capitol was a turning point. Standing before a room of lawmakers, he shared his story once again, emphasizing the need for systemic change. Accountability isn't anti-police, he said, it's pro-justice. The bill passed with bipartisan support, marking a major victory. But the experience also left Elijah feeling the weight of his role. I'm just a kid, he confided to Maya after the hearing. I don't know if I can keep doing this. Maya smiled gently. You don't have to have all the answers. Just keep being yourself. That's enough. Back home, the Carter family hosted a community event at Cedar Grove Park to celebrate the changes Elijah's case had inspired. The park, once a symbol of division, now buzzed with life as people of all backgrounds came together. During the event, Clara Johnson, the woman who had written to Elijah, approached him. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said, tears in her eyes. "You've given me hope for my son." Elijah hugged her, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "We're all in this together." He said Elijah knew his fight wasn't over. While his case had sparked important conversations and changes, the broader issues of systemic racism and injustice remained. As he sat in his room one evening, scrolling through messages of support and criticism, he reflected on how far he'd come. He wasn't the same boy who had been humiliated in the park. He was stronger, more resilient, and determined to keep making a difference. With a pen in hand, he began drafting an essay for his college applications. The opening line read, "Sometimes, the fight for justice chooses you." The days following the verdict were quieter. But for Elijah and his family, the journey to healing was just beginning. Though Wilkes had been convicted and reforms were being discussed, the emotional scars of the ordeal lingered. Elijah often found himself replaying the events of that day in his mind, the accusations, the humiliation, the fear. He started attending therapy, encouraged by Maya and his father. In one session, his therapist asked, "What's the hardest part for you now?" Elijah thought for a moment. "It's knowing that even though we won, people like Wilkes still exist. There's still so much to fix." The therapist nodded. "Change is slow, but it starts with people like you." One Sunday evening, the Carter family gathered for dinner, something they hadn't done properly in weeks. The table was filled with homemade dishes, laughter, and shared stories. "I missed this," Elijah said, smiling as he helped himself to a second serving of his mother's mac and cheese. Chief Carter raised his glass. "To Elijah, my son, my hero. You've shown more strength than most adults I know." Elijah blushed but smiled proudly. For the first time in months, he felt like things might finally be returning to normal. Cedar Grove's City Council convened a special meeting to address the reforms proposed in the wake of Elijah's case. Activists, led by Maya and other civil rights advocates, filled the room, demanding action. Among the measures discussed were mandating body cameras for all officers, establishing an independent review board for complaints against police, implementing anti-racism training for law enforcement. Elijah spoke at the meeting, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't about revenge, it's about accountability, about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." By the end of the session, the council voted unanimously to adopt the reforms, marking a significant victory for the community. Life in prison was a stark contrast to the authority Wilkes once wielded. Stripped of his badge and power, he faced the consequences of his actions in a way he never had before. One day, he received a visit from his estranged sister, Laura, who had always opposed his views. "You could have been better," she said bluntly. "You had the chance to make a difference, but you chose hate. Now look at you." Her words struck a chord. But Wilkes's pride kept him silent. Alone in his cell that night, he began to write, a journal entry reflecting on the choices that had led him there. As summer approached, Elijah prepared for his high school graduation. The ceremony felt monumental, not just as an academic achievement but as a symbol of resilience. Standing on the stage in his cap and gown, he addressed his classmates as valedictorian. "We've all faced challenges, but those challenges don't define us," he said. "What defines us is how we rise after we fall, how we use our struggles to make the world better. Let's be the generation that doesn't just hope for change but makes it happen." His speech earned a standing ovation, and as Elijah walked off the stage, he spotted his father wiping away a tear. Elijah's story continued to make waves nationally. He was invited to appear on a prominent talk show, where he shared his journey and the impact of the trial. "What do you want people to take away from your story?" the host asked. Elijah paused before answering, "That justice is worth fighting for. That it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it's hard. And that change is possible if we work together." The interview went viral, sparking renewed conversations about systemic racism and the power of youth activism back at home. Elijah spent more time reflecting on his future. Though architecture remained his passion, he began to see how his voice could make a difference in other areas. One afternoon, he sat with Maya, discussing potential college majors. Have you ever thought about law? She asked. Smiling. You'd make a great advocate. Elijah chuckled. One fight was enough for me, but maybe. I just want to make an impact. Whatever I do. Maya nodded. You already have. Cedar Grove continued to change in the aftermath of Elijah's case. The reforms implemented by the city council brought a new sense of accountability to the police department. The park where the incident occurred was renamed Carter Grove Park, honoring Elijah's courage and resilience. A new mural was painted on one of the park's walls, depicting a powerful image of unity and justice. With Elijah's likeness standing tall among the community, Elijah decided to write a letter to Wilkes. Though he knew Wilkes might never read it, the act was cathartic. In the letter, Elijah wrote, I don't know if you'll ever understand the pain you caused me. But I refuse to let that pain define me. I hope one day you realize the harm you've done and use it as a chance to change. Not for me, but for yourself. He mailed the letter, unsure if he wanted a reply. But sending it gave him a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed as the summer ended. Elijah prepared to leave for college. His family and friends threw him a send-off party, celebrating not just his academic success but the strength he had shown over the past year. Standing among the people who had supported him, Elijah felt a deep sense of gratitude. None of this would have been possible without all of you. He said, thank you for believing in me. As he packed his bags for college, he included a small framed photo of his family, along with a copy of the newspaper article declaring, Justice for Elijah, a community united. College was a fresh start for Elijah. He moved to the bustling city of Atlanta to attend Harris State University, a historically black college known for its vibrant culture and activism. The campus was alive with energy, students discussing social issues, organizing events, and pursuing their dreams. Elijah found himself blending in for the first time in a long time. Here, he wasn't just the kid from the trial. He was free to explore his passions, excel in his classes, and make new friends without the weight of his past following him everywhere. Still, reminders of his journey remained. His story often came up in conversations, and professors encouraged him to share his experiences during discussions on justice and equality months into his college life. Elijah received an unexpected envelope in the mail. It was from Wilkes. He hesitated before opening it, unsure of what it might contain. Inside was a handwritten note. Elijah, I've had a lot of time to think. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand the harm I caused. Not just to you, but to others like you. You didn't deserve what I did to you. And I'm sorry. Grant Wilkes. Elijah read the letter several times, his emotions swirling. He showed it to his father, who studied it carefully. What do you think? Elijah asked. Chief Carter sighed. It's a start, but it's up to you if you want to respond. Elijah decided to let the letter be. He wasn't ready to forgive, but he appreciated the small step Wilkes had taken toward accountability. Elijah's time at college brought him closer to people with diverse perspectives. In one of his classes, he met Jordan Price, a white student majoring in criminal justice. Jordan approached Elijah one day after class. Hey, I know who you are. Jordan said awkwardly. I just wanted to say, I admire what you did. It's people like you who inspire me to go into this field. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You want to be a cop? Yeah, Jordan said, but not like the ones we hear about in stories like yours. I want to be the kind of cop who makes things better. The two struck up an unlikely friendship, often debating the complexities of law enforcement and reform. Elijah found the conversations challenging but eye-opening, as they pushed him to see the nuances in the fight for justice in his architecture classes. Elijah poured his emotions into a design project, a community center dedicated to social justice. The center would feature a library, meeting spaces for activism, and an art gallery showcasing stories of resilience. When he presented the project in class, his professor, Dr. Elaine Brooks, was visibly moved. This isn't just a building, she said, it's a legacy. I think you found your calling. Elijah. The project reignited Elijah's passion for architecture, showing him how his talents could merge with his desire to create meaningful change. Maya remained a constant presence in Elijah's life, serving as a mentor and friend. During a visit to Atlanta for a legal conference, she took Elijah out for lunch. You've grown a lot, she said, smiling. It's incredible to see. Thanks to you. Elijah replied, I couldn't have done any of this without your help. Maya waved him off. You give me too much credit. You're the one who stood up when it mattered most. But I do have one piece of advice: never stop learning. The world needs people like you. But you need to keep sharpening your skills. Her words stayed with Elijah, motivating him to dive deeper into his studies and activism during a break from school. Elijah returned to Cedar Grove to visit his family. He walked through the park that had become a symbol of his journey. The new mural, featuring his likeness among other community leaders, brought a lump to his throat. He met with old friends, including Marcus, who had started a local youth mentorship program. You've been busy, Marcus said, grinning, but don't forget where you came from. Never, Elijah replied. This place made me who I am. They spent the afternoon brainstorming ways to bring more resources to Cedar Grove, reaffirming their commitment to uplifting their community in prison. Wilkes continued to grapple with his past. He joined a rehabilitation program that focused on understanding the impact of prejudice and abuse of power. Though many inmates distrusted him, he found moments of clarity through the program's workshops. During one session, an instructor asked, "What would you say to the people you hurt if they were here now?" Wilkes hesitated before replying, "I'd tell them I was wrong, that I didn't see them as people. And I should have. I don't expect them to forgive me. But I need to say it." Though his road to redemption was long and uncertain, Wilkes began taking small steps toward change as Elijah approached the end of his first year of college. He received an invitation to an awards ceremony in Washington, D.C. The event honored young leaders making a difference in their communities, and Elijah was one of the recipients. On stage, he accepted the award with humility. "This isn't just for me," he said. "It's for everyone who stood by me, everyone who fights for what's right, and everyone who believes we can create a better world." The audience gave him a standing ovation. But Elijah's thoughts were on Cedar Grove and the people who had inspired him to keep going. Back at college, Elijah started laying the groundwork for a nonprofit organization focused on bridging the gap between communities and law enforcement. He envisioned programs that fostered dialogue, provided resources for marginalized groups, and trained officers in cultural competency. "Your vision is ambitious," Jordan said when Elijah shared his plans. "But if anyone can pull it off, it's you." Elijah smiled. "It's not just about me. It's about all of us working together." 2 years after Elijah first envisioned it, his dream project became a reality. The Carter Grove Center for Social Justice opened its doors in the heart of his hometown. The building was more than just a structure, it was a symbol of resilience and hope. The grand opening ceremony brought together people from all walks of life. Elijah stood at the podium, gazing at the crowd, his family, Maya, Marcus, Jordan, and many others who had been part of his journey. "This center is a testament to what we can achieve when we refuse to give up," Elijah said. "It's not just about me. It's about all of us working toward a future where justice and equality aren't ideals but realities." As the ribbon was cut, applause erupted. Elijah felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing his pain had been transformed into something meaningful months after the center's opening. Elijah received another letter from Wilkes. This one was longer, more reflective. "Elijah, I've spent the last few years trying to understand who I was and why I did what I did. I'll never be able to undo the harm I caused. But I want you to know that your strength changed me. Thank you for showing me the person I failed to be. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you know that I'm trying to become someone better. Grant Wilkes." Elijah read the letter in silence. His emotions conflicted. He shared it with his father, who studied it carefully. "Do you believe him?" Elijah asked. "I think people can change," Chief Carter said, "but only time will tell if he truly has." Elijah decided to keep the letter as a reminder of how far he had come and the impact of his actions. Even on those who had wronged him. As Elijah's nonprofit grew, he began mentoring younger activists who were eager to make a difference. One of his mentees, Tiana Rivers, reminded him of himself, passionate, determined, and unafraid to speak out. During one of their meetings, Tiana asked, "How did you stay strong when things got so hard?" Elijah smiled. "I didn't always feel strong. But I leaned on the people who believed in me. And I reminded myself that every step forward, no matter how small, matters." Tiana nodded, her resolve clear. "I want to make an impact like you did." "You will," Elijah said, "maybe even bigger." Years later, Elijah stood on the balcony of his newly designed office at the Carter Grove Center. The city skyline stretched before him, a mix of old and new, tradition and progress. His architectural career had flourished, with projects across the country blending innovative design with community impact. But the center remained his heart and soul, a place where ideas became action and where justice was not just a goal but a practice. As he watched the sunset, his phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Big turnout for the rally today. Wish you could have seen it." Elijah smiled, texting back, "Proud of you. Keep it going." On the anniversary of the park incident, Elijah returned to Cedar Grove Park. The once divisive space now buzzed with families, friends, and laughter. The mural honoring Elijah and the movement he inspired stood proudly, a reminder of how far the community had come. As Elijah walked through the park, a young boy approached him, holding a basketball. "Are you Elijah Carter?" the boy asked, eyes wide with admiration. "I am," Elijah said, crouching to meet his gaze. "My dad told me about what you did," the boy said. "He said you're a hero." Elijah smiled, his heart full. "You know, you can be a hero too. All it takes is courage and kindness." The boy grinned, running back to his friends. Elijah watched him go, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Elijah's journey became a story told not just in his town but across the country. Schools used his case to teach about justice, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what's right. His nonprofit expanded, partnering with other organizations to bring about meaningful reform. And while the fight for equality continued, Elijah's work served as a beacon of hope, a reminder that change was possible. Standing in the Carter Grove Center one evening, Elijah gazed at a plaque on the wall. It read, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr." Elijah traced the words with his fingers, a smile playing on his lips. His story wasn't just about the past, it was about the future. And it was a future worth fighting for.